You are listening to Heart Over Ego Radio, a network of shows offering healing and guidance for your beautiful journey. Tune in on Mondays for the Alchemy Sisters, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 Eastern. Tuesdays, tune in and tune up. Body Awareness and Self-Care, 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Wednesdays, One for All is Love, 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Thursdays, Unbound with Cynthia Martin, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 Eastern. Fridays, The Witching Hour with Green Witch Village and the Alchemy Sisters, 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And on Fridays, Rain Radio, 10 Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Saturdays, Creating Heaven on Earth, 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And Sundays, Everyday Psychic Radio at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. This is the Heart Over Ego Radio Network.
Hello and welcome to Creating Heaven on Earth, ascending from the 3D to the 5D. You are here with Mandee Elam, and most Saturdays I like to hold a discussion with another way shower about what's going on here right now with this concept of New Earth, what it would be like to ground our collective vision of heaven to earth, the difference between the 3D, the 5D, and other dimensions, and how to start navigating all of this information. So I'm really excited for my guest today. Our guest today is Adam Dince, who is the founder of Sacred Stairways Healing, and he has so many incredible modalities and magic that he offers in this world, and I'm so excited to hold space with him. Welcome, Adam. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, my friend. It's good to speak to you again. It's been a little while.
It has been a little while. Adam's a friend of the Alchemy Sisters and Heart Over Ego Radio, and Jenny and I have had the privilege of being a guest on Adam's podcast as well. So that's just a wonderful thing. We're happy to know you.
Well, the pleasure is all on this side of the microphone. So, yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's an honor. Will you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself? Maybe start with your business, what Sacred Stairways Healing is and what it includes. You have quite a few things underneath that, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So, again, my name is Adam Dince, and I'm the founder of Sacred Stairways Healing, and you can check out the website at sacredstairways.com. And Sacred Stairways is really a labor of love for me. You know, I started as after I found my calling as a healer and my gifts and ability as a healer, I started my healing modality journey in Reiki. I think a lot of us energy healers and healers do. And so once I reached the level of Reiki Master, I always feel like I'm in Star Wars and talking about Jedi Master when we talk about Reiki Master. I feel like I should have a lightsaber somewhere. But once I reached the level of Reiki Master, I opened up my healing studio here in beautiful Stillwater, Minnesota, and I started to find myself growing into other modalities. So I started practicing shamanic Reiki, and I didn't even realize that it was shamanic Reiki until I read a book about what shamanic Reiki was. It just started coming through in the healing sessions that I was doing with my clients, and after that I was introduced to the beautiful modality of sacred rose healing. And what a beautiful modality that is. And then, just moved almost naturally, and we'll talk a little bit more about this today, into past life and between life regressions. And, I've always kind of been fascinated with the mystical world of past lives and reincarnation and where we go in between lives. And so I have just such a huge passion for guiding these past and between lives sessions. And so that's a bit about Sacred Stairways. We offer a lot of different healing services and spiritual counseling. And I also host, as Mandee mentioned earlier, the Spirit Woke podcast. You can check out the podcast at spiritwoke.com, and you can find Mandee and Jenny's podcast episode there as well. And we've taken the summer off to recharge, and we're coming back at the end of this month with our first episode. I believe it's going to launch on August 26th, so very excited about that. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me and Sacred Stairways and Spirit Woke. So appreciate you asking about that, Mandee.
Oh, I love it. And your website is sacredstairwayshealing.com, right?
sacredstairways.com.
Sacredstairways.com. Perfect. Just so our listeners, they may want to look it up as we chat. I have so many things to ask you, and I know we're going to get deep into past lives and in between lives, but can you tell us a little bit about Sacred Rose Healing and what that's all about?
Yeah, so rose healing is something that I was introduced to through two folks who are on the podcast, on the Spirit Woke podcast, a little over a year ago, and they had just gotten back from, I shouldn't say they had just gotten back, but they had spent 6 months in Mexico studying with a shaman who was a master of rose healing. And so they were on the podcast and they were talking about rose healing, and so I reached out to them afterwards because I just really felt drawn to it, and I said I would love to learn how to do this myself, and so they agreed to teach me. And really the concept of sacred rose healing is, roses carry the highest vibration of any plant known to man. The rose, I believe, vibrates at 320 hertz, where I think the human body ranges anywhere from between 60 and 80. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, so these are just estimates, but just know those ranges are spot on. And so, and if you look at where disease vibrates, it's at an even lower level. I think cancer is like in the 30s or 40s, right? And so, what roses can do is heal all kinds of things just by raising the body's vibration through laying roses on the body and connecting the rose to the energetic body of the client. And it's really cool. It works a lot like almost like pendulum work in a sense. So if I have a client who comes in for rose healing, we'll work on setting the intention, what's going on, what kind of things are, the client looking to heal. And then once they're on the table, they close, very similar to Reiki, they lay down, close their eyes, put the nice music on, meditative music. And then I connect with the roses, and then I connect the roses to my client. And then it's a dozen roses, and I usually have the client bring the roses in because I want them to pick the bouquet that really calls to them. And, I'll just take one rose at a time, and I'll take the rose and go over the body. And the rose, similar to what a pendulum would do, if you do pendulum work and you ask it questions, yes, no, I don't know, can't tell you, all of those things, and the pendulum has its own movements. The roses do the same in my hands. So I know exactly where to lay the roses on the person's body. So I'll just move the rose over the person's body, and as it starts to move in a certain area, I know that's where it's supposed to go. And I do, and of course this happens 12 times for each rose in the bouquet. And then after I've laid all 12 roses down, I let the roses stay until they're done with that grid, if you will. And then I pick the roses back up and then do the same process over and over again until the roses are finished doing their work. And it really is a beautiful restorative experience. And it's also a really great complement to Reiki. So a lot of times I'll do sort of a dual session. So I'll lay the roses on, and then I'll also do the hands-on Reiki. Obviously with COVID, not so much hands-on anymore, but but yeah. So
appropriately distance Reiki in the physical.
Yes. I haven't figured out quite yet how to do the distant rose because it's a different energy. With Reiki, it's universal, and you don't have to be in proximity to your client. Where with rose healing you do. So for now, rose healing is on hiatus until such time that it's safe to go back to regular practices.
That's hard when you get a new mode. I have the same kind of thing going on with me. I got my level 2 Reiki, and I was really excited to infuse that this summer into some really nice in-person sessions, and it just didn't happen because of COVID, but I'm always honoring everything's happening for the highest good. And even with the roses, I was thinking about it in the 6 feet apart when I was making a joke. It's so interesting because our biomagnetic field is 6 to 8 feet around us. And so with all this distancing, though it's certainly been a challenge, I'm holding space and hope for it that it's helping beings to be within their own energy, some of them for the first time within their lives, and maybe learning what their actual vibration is.
Yeah, you're so right about that. And even like, I think a lot of folks, instead of it's uncomfortable to be alone, and so we gravitate towards other people to distract us, maybe from things that we haven't healed, or you know, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, Mandee. You get someone who's at home for a little bit of time by themselves, and they go stir crazy. They don't know what to do, so it's like rush out and do something. And I've been seeing a lot of my friends who aren't necessarily, you know, hippy dippy spiritual folks like you and me, you know, really going deep for the first time in terms of who they are and learning to just be comfortable in their own skin. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a great time to reflect and to connect with our souls and really understand who we are.
It really is, you know, and you also hit me when you were talking about how high of a vibration the rose is. And I have a beautiful rose bouquet right in front of me, and I'm so excited. I have that today while we're chatting about it. But I was thinking, I was listening. I love Louise Hay, and I tune in with her whenever I can. And recently I was reminded, she said that one of the feelings that feeds cancer is shame, or is guilt and grief and shame, and that those all vibrate at that lowest vibration of 40 as well. Guilt, shame, resentment, and grief, I think, were all like the lowest. And so I just found that really interesting when you were mentioning that.
Yeah, that's why Reiki and rose healing work so well together, because, you know, essentially the roses raise the vibration of the body, right? Mm-hmm. So not just your energetic body, your physical body. And then the Reiki is more of that soul level healing. So you get the benefits of both. You know, it's really cool. So the Reiki energy goes where it needs to go in order to provide the soul's greatest good, and then the rose healing just lifts the whole body up and as a whole. And it's really a beautiful combination.
Yeah, I just love it. Well, let's get into how to heal these souls and people a little deeper with between lives, past lives, and all that magic you're bringing into awareness right now.
Awesome. I can't wait to dig in here.
So let's just start with, what is a past life, or what is in between lives, wherever you want to start with that, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, as a practitioner, as a hypnotherapist, I am a certified hypnotherapist, and so I use hypnotherapy alongside of past and between lives regression. So, but before we get into the regression aspect of it, I believe we all live many lives, and I haven't always believed that. In fact, growing up, I grew up in a very westernized religious construct, and it was you die and you go to heaven and you spend the rest of your life worshiping God, and that's on the other side, and that's how it was. And so, and frankly, the whole idea of living another life didn't really seem like something I wanted to believe in, because Mandee, life can be hard. We go through a lot in this human skin, and to think of coming back again and doing it all over again can be a little bit overwhelming if you think about it for too long. And so at that point, I just part of me didn't believe in it because it wasn't part of my religious views, but the other piece is I just didn't even want to entertain the idea that something like that was even in the realm of possibility. And so, but with that being said, my dad passed away in 2005, and that was really my first exposure to the mystical side of the universe. And I'd spoken with a medium who was able to connect with my dad on the other side, and I couldn't believe it. Like how in the world can a human being, connect with a soul or a person who's dead? My brain couldn't process that, and it was the first time that I think my mind opened up to the possibilities of things being out there that I couldn't explain, that were outside of my paradigm. Mm-hmm. And so, it's been a long journey, and I won't tell the whole story because I'll take up the whole hour here of the podcast or so. But I ended up meeting a few years ago a brilliant psychic here in the Twin Cities here in Minnesota, who is an expert at past life readings. And at the time I kind of sort of believed in past lives, but I wasn't sold. I'd been reading a lot about past lives, and it sounded cool, but I just wasn't sure. And she did a past life reading on me, and went through about 7 or 10 lives in the hour and a half or 2 hours that we had, and every single one of them just resonated with something that was going on in my current life. And it made sense. A lot of the lives that she had told me about before mirrored, like a few of my lives I was in the military. And in this life I'm a veteran. And, there were just a lot of things that were the similar continuity through those past lives in this life. And so I ended up coming out of that experience believing in past lives, but not necessarily knowing. And to me, when we deal in the spiritual realm, knowing is something I think that's really important for us, because a belief is faith, right? A knowing is something certain. You don't have to have faith when you know something, right? So
and the secret to the law of attraction too, from what we can kind of understand, is really shifting into that feeling and that knowing. And it is. I'm so glad you're bringing that up right now, because it's a really important thing going on just collectively, and people are tuning into their discernment and trying to understand what their faiths or beliefs in are, in all different kinds of things. But if we can encourage our listeners to start experimenting with that knowing, it's going to serve each individual so much.
Absolutely. I mean, if you know every time you add 2 + 2, you're going to get 4, right? It versus, versus a belief, which it could be, it might not be. So, for me, I was a believer at that point. I wouldn't say I knew. And then I started reading this book called Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton, who is he's no longer with us, although he is. And he's a world-renowned psychologist and hypnotherapist. He did over 7,000 regressions in the course of his career. And Journey of Souls, he writes about this other type of regression that he discovered called between lives, or life between lives. A regression. So in a past life regression, you take somebody back, and as the name signifies, to a past life. In the between life regression, you actually take someone to the place they go when their soul leaves their body and before they reincarnate here as a human. And he was really one of the first ones. I think he may have been the first ones. I don't know if he was first or Dr. Weiss was first, but either way, I think it was Dr. Newton. But these stories in Journey of Souls was just so phenomenal. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This doctor who was just reading transcripts or writing transcripts of his clients' experiences under hypnosis doing these regressions, and it just blew my mind. It was just so fascinating. And so after reading that book, I said, I want to experience this myself. And I was fortunate enough to find a hypnotherapist who studied with Dr. Newton. And and so I did a past life regression with him, and I saw an entire past life. I saw my death scene. I experienced my soul popping out of my body. And when my soul popped out of my body, I learned all of the lessons of the life that I had just seen. And it was just such a beautifully powerful experience. And, even after my soul left my body, I floated, if you will, and I saw my memorial service, and I was just observing it as the soul. And then I raised all the way up into this space of nothingness, of this just beautiful, peaceful consciousness. And when I came out of it, I realized that a lot of what I had experienced in that past life are things that I'm still dealing with. I was still dealing with in this life, in this current life at the moment. And so it was so incredibly healing. And I said, you know what? This is something that I want to be able to offer my clients. This is something, it's so profound, because it was at that moment I truly did believe, or not just believe, but I truly knew that this past life thing is real. It's not made up. It's not, some psychic just telling you what he or she sees. You're actually seeing it with your own third eye, and it's as vivid as the most vivid dream you've ever had. It's incredible, and you don't forget it when you come out of a regression. You remember everything for years. And so I started studying hypnotherapy, and got really deep into, and that led me into working with people who, maybe want to quit smoking or lose weight or a variety of different things. But really where I've honed in from a therapy perspective is working with people in the past life and in the between life space, because that's really where you get some deep soul level healing, some deep soul level healing, not hearing.
Totally.
But maybe hearing too.
Hey, frequencies and vibrations and sounds are a thing here.
There you go.
Oh, I think it's brilliant. My first past life, I haven't done a regression yet, but I really am interested in that. I think it'll be time for me soon. But I have had some past life readings, and my first one was with Jenny, the other Alchemy sister and co-founder here on Heart Over Ego Radio. And it was one of those spontaneous awakening moments where she had taken me back to a past life that was pretty traumatic, but it made me understand why I came in with such a fear of everyone I love in this lifetime dying in a tragic way. And at that time in my life, I was super afraid of that. And once Jenny told me what had happened in this lifetime, and she did some chakra work on my heart chakra, she dropped like a engagement ring in it, all kinds of things. She gave me all this clarity, and that fear left me that day when I walked off her table, and I understood everything from such a different perspective because I was able to receive what it is she was telling me about my past life at that time. And then my body was just, like you said, able to really, my third eye, go and see it and activate that memory for me to help it clear and release. So I think it's absolute magic what you're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, even as the therapist, sitting with my clients watching, oftentimes, I learn so much from their experiences, and, I take arduous notes during our session so afterwards we can review and really help try to integrate what they just experienced in the hypnotic state in their consciousness and really help them process. Because to your point, some people experience their death and it's fairly traumatic. And even though it can be healing, it's something to talk through. You don't want to just let someone go on their merry way after that without really getting time to really work those learnings and insights in. And, when you come out of hypnosis, meaning once you come out of the hypnotic state, you're still kind of in a twilight for 20 to 30 minutes. And some people even up to an hour, where you're still, some people think of hypnosis as you're taking someone into their subconscious and that's what they're accessing. I actually believe that in hypnosis, you're getting somebody's brainwave to such a place that they're now interdimensional and they're not accessing their subconscious alone. I mean, that's part of it, but they're also accessing a different dimension, and it allows them to access their soul in a really profound way. That most people don't have the ability to access when their conscious minds are running everything. And so in this twilight period, they're still really connected. And so helping clients through those, the processing afterwards can take the client a long way in terms of healing what they experienced in that regression, whether it's a past life, a between life, or even a current life regression. I mean, current life regressions are a big part of what I do too. So you can think about, I had one of my more interesting current life regressions is a friend of mine came to me initially for help hypnotherapy. Or I'm sorry, not hypnotherapy, for hypnosis. He was having issues sleeping, and so I was going to just do some hypnotic suggestions to help him. When you're up at 2 a.m, or when it's 10 o'clock at night, your brain is going to start to tell you it's time to go to bed. It's time to go to bed. But the more I dug in with him, the more I realized, and he shared with me that he had this experience as a child between the ages of 6 and 8, which is when we're most influential, right? Which is where we form most of our brain forms most of its filters that we live with as adults, and through the rest of our lives. And he shared that when he was between 6 and 8 years old, he was highly sensitive to spirit, and so was his mother. And every night when he'd go to bed, he'd see shadow people in his room, and they would terrorize him. And I was like, well, there's why you can't sleep, my friend. It's not because you're an entrepreneur. It's not because you're constantly on the go and trying to get stuff done. It's because you have this trauma from for a good 2 years of your life where these shadow people just absolutely terrorized you. So we did a current life regression where I brought him back to a memory and when I say I brought him back, I don't bring people to a specific memory. We just set an intention, and then as the client gets into the hypnotic state, it's up to them, where they go. But he ended up right in a memory as an 8-year-old child in his room with the shadow people around, and it was just as real for him as it was when he was a child. And we worked through that together. and we work through him being able to take back control of the situation versus feeling like he was out of control, that the shadow people, own the fear there. He was able to take it back, and he saw that they weren't as intimidating or scary as they had presented themselves to be. And so, current life regressions too, but processing that afterwards, right? I mean, imagine experiencing that. You haven't seen these figures in maybe 30 years, right? And now you come out of hypnosis and you've just experienced it for the last 2 hours again. Just taking the time to process after the session's over, like what just happened is really important. So it is important, for people who are going through regression, whether it's past, current, between life, to work with someone who really does understand the processes and knows how to. It's just as much about the therapy as it is the experience itself.
I agree. Absolutely. And it's so important to look at all the aspects of all the things that are coming up. And in our society, we've been so desensitized to, even just with TV and social programming and different things, to see traumatic things, to experience that, and then to just move on. And it's important, and I love that you brought that up, to give yourself the time, if you're going to be starting these healing experiences, to give yourself the time to actually process it and breathe into it and see what all it's offering for you. And just to let yourself be a human, because that can be pretty shocking.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So the in-between lives, is that the twilight you're discussing as well? Is that the same thing, or is that different?
No, that's different. So the twilight I'm explaining is more of, I call it a hypnotic twilight.
Okay.
So you're still kind of in the hypnotic state when you come out. You're still very sensitive to that dimension or realm that you've accessed while under hypnosis. It's like, I love the way Ram Dass shares the different dimensions. It's like you just change the channel, like, hey, I'm watching channel 3, and then I turn the channel, and now I'm watching channel 4. I'm no longer watching channel 3. And it's the same thing with dimensions, when you get your brain to a place, just like through meditation, right, where you get to a theta and a delta and an alpha, you access different places. So hypnotherapy takes you, going under hypnosis, going into a hypnotic trance just opens you up to those different dimensions, meaning, and what that means is you're more sensitive to suggestion, you're more sensitive to making soul level changes in that environment. Now, between lives is a really interesting type of regression, because that's where you can really explore some cool stuff. Not that past lives aren't, because you can explore a ton of really cool things in your past life too. But I get a lot of clients, and I'm sure you talk with people too, Mandee, where it's like, I want to know what my purpose in life is, or what did I sign up for here, or whatever questions. Why did I have to go through this abuse in this life? There could be a variety of different questions that people have. And then some people just want to experience what it's like to be on the other side. And so the way a between life regression works is really one of two ways. So it all involves going back to a past life. One way is, and really it's up to the client. Like I can't dictate what happens. It's really up to the client's soul. So just know that as I'm explaining this process.
Yeah, okay.
So similar to a past life, and I didn't share sort of the technique, but a client comes in, we've already have the intention and the goal set. They lay down, they get comfortable, and I do all of this virtually now through Skype and through phone. So we don't have to be in the same room. In fact, all of my clients right now are virtual, and it works. If not better over the phone than it does in person, because people have their headphones in their ears. They're not distracted by any sounds that are coming in. It actually, I'm surprised at how incredible it works remotely. But with that being said, I take my clients into a hypnotic state, and then I deepen them in the hypnotic state. And then from that point forward, there's an entry point into a past life. So I have a variety of different techniques. One of those is I have a client use their imagination to visualize a hallway, and they can, whatever that hallway looks like is what it looks like. It's up to their imagination. And within that hallway, they see a bunch of doors. There may be a few, there may be a lot, and it's just up to the client. And each of those doors represents a past life. And so then what I have the client do is find a door that stands out to them, that's calling to them. And so they find that door, and I have them stand in front of the door, and then I connect the client to the emotion that they describe during our intake session. So when it's like, so what do you want to work on? Okay, I want to work on this. Okay, talk to me about the emotions that you feel when you think about that goal or that intention. And so I write all that down. I have all of the notes. So then before the person walks through the door, I really connect them to those emotions so they're feeling it really intensely, because the stronger emotionally you are at, the more vivid the experience is. And then once they're connected, I push right through the door. So they go, boom, right through the door. And then they start to explain the things that they're seeing. And so a past life and a between life work very similar in that regard. And so, but typically if you're going to do a between life, you've already done a past life. And the reason is, if, to your point, Mandee, you experienced a really traumatic death scene, right? Like it was really intense. Mm-hmm. And so when you experience something as intense like that, you often need time to process it. And you don't want to just jump right into the between life, because it can be that death scene can be really, really, really intense. And so I like to have a client do a past life first before they do a between lives. But with that being said, as the client walks through the door and sees that first memory, in a between life, they'll either go in a between life session, they'll either go to a scene where they're in the middle of their life or towards the end of their life. They just need enough memories to access from that past life to where it really gets them into the moment, that really gets them into what they're doing. And then I sort of quickly navigate them to their death scene. So this is one way to do it. And then from their death scene, their soul, almost everyone sees their soul leave their body, and they see their soul rise, and it goes up, and I have them find the light, and they go to the light, and then the between lives session starts there. Now, other people will walk through that door, and they'll see themselves as a baby.
I've heard that. Okay.
Yeah, they'll see themselves as a baby or an infant, and they're in whatever scene they're or whatever memory they're in. But then instead of guiding them to the next relevant memory and to the death scene, they actually find themselves pulled backwards into their mother's womb, or even just straight up into the ether. And so those are two different ways to access the between life state. And so when you're in the between life state, that's where you can meet your soul family, and you can learn who your soul family is in this current lifetime. You can watch your life planning review, or not your life planning review, but you can watch your life planning session. You can meet your twin flame. You can meet all kinds of amazing entities or spirits. And I know and I'm not speaking from things I've read. These are from clients that I've had who have accessed all of these different things, and it really can help. One of the more profound experiences that I had with a between life was my client ended up meeting up with her dad's soul on the other side, and her dad had harmed her when she was young, and so when she met her dad's soul in the between life portal, if you will, or the between life realm, he was really upset that she hadn't forgiven him. And she's like, but I have forgiven you. And he's like, but you haven't forgiven me. And they ended up having this communication with each other where the father explained why he did the things that he did. And he explained that how hard it was for him to agree to incarnate in this life to do these things to his daughter, because he loved her so much as being one of the closest members of her soul family on the other side. And when she understood that, she was able to forgive him. And when she forgave him, she saw this layer of weight just lift off of his being and just went away. And it freed her at the same time, because I think she had thought she had forgiven him. But this level of soul level healing was so profound for her that, it changed her life, and so the between life stage can really you can really have some phenomenal soul level healing. And so, and what's funny, Mandee, is I haven't personally done a between life yet, meaning no one's done one for me. So I haven't experienced it, but I have a bunch of clients who have, and as I said, I take copious notes and I write things down so I can walk through their experience with them after it's over. And I'm not going to say that I'm jealous, but I'm like, I want to experience that too. Like so my goal here is to do one of them in the future with a trained hypnotherapist as well. But, so that's a little bit different. That's the difference between the past and the between life. Is a past life you see an actual past life that you've lived, and a between life is you see what happened after your soul leaves your body or before you were born, where you are, and whatever is most relevant for you to see from that experience is what you see. So you could do 3 or 4 different between life experiences and see 3 or 4 different completely different things. Mm. So it's really just what your soul is ready to see and believes is best for the moment that you're in this life.
No, I just think it's awesome. And it's really cool, the between, because my guides have shown me quite a bit, and through connecting with spirit and learning from other people and them sharing their experiences, the whole life planning session. And you really do get to pick, where you're going to incarnate and the set of parents you want to choose in this lifetime. And just as you were saying, often we don't understand this down here in our current existence in this current dimension, but a lot of times the people who hurt us the most are our soul family and choose to do that for us. And it's all interwoven, and there's all these beautiful things that go back and forth. But some of our greatest pains do have such purpose in our soul ascension and progression, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's a teacher. Everything in our lives is a teacher. And the good, there's teaching in the good, and there's teaching in what we perceive to be not good. And I think one of the hardest things for us as humans, the human side of our beingness, one of the hardest things for us to wrap our heads around is that we agreed to a lot of the things that we're experiencing. And, we don't, when we experience that between life state, we actually can get a sense of the mindset, if you for lack of a better term, that we're in, where we sign up for these things, right? Because if I would have told my client that, well, your dad was a member of your soul, one of the closest members of your soul family, and you and him agreed to do this because you needed to learn X, Y, and Z, and, he had to love you so much to be able to do what he did to you. If I would have explained that to her, she might have looked at me and said, what, are you crazy? Like,
totally.
Right? Like, why would anyone say that to me? Like, you don't even know what he did to me. But when the client actually sees that for themselves, and they're able to, really experience it firsthand, then there's nothing that any of us have to tell them. It's a firsthand experience, and there's that knowing that we talked about. And once you've seen that, like, talk about awakening, right? Talk about a wake up. People just have the most profound experiences. I had one client who, after her between life experience, we were doing the sort of the review afterwards, after I brought her out of hypnosis, and she said to me, Adam, there aren't any more doors that I need to walk through. Mm. And I just thought that was so profound for her to say that. Here's someone who's been on the spiritual journey, as anyone who goes through an awakening, right, through meditation and reading and trying to figure out what's my purpose and why am I here and what am I supposed to do in my life, and to say there are no more doors that I feel that I need to walk through, it's humbling. It's really, really humbling. That's how powerful these experiences are.
Oh, I just love it. I think it's fantastic. You were giving me a funny memory. I was laughing because I was at one of my favorite spiritual teachers is Rebecca Campbell. She wrote Light is the New Black, Rise Sister Rise. She's an incredible Magdalene high priestess and lots of other things. But I was at a retreat with about 60 other women, and she was lecturing at the time, and she mentioned about choosing your parents, and she reiterated this, and then this woman who was sitting next to me, she's like, what? And then kind of whispered, what? And Rebecca Campbell reiterated, so yes, you did. You chose your mother. And the girl's like, fuck off. And she gets up and walks out. She came back 10 minutes later. She's like, I just had to take a breath on that one. I was like, sister, I get it. So you gave me a funny memory I forgot all about.
Yeah, that'd be awesome if when people complained about things, you could just say, well, you chose for that to happen.
Right? It would be we're getting there. So that, is a nice bridge into another part of what I want to talk to you about is what are you seeing and hearing about our future existence? And, you mentioned the client with the doors that she didn't have to walk through anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't any more for her to. What are some things you're seeing and feeling as we're bridging into this new earth that we're all starting to create?
From what I've, in between life regression, oftentimes what I'll do with clients once they've kind of seen all of the memories of that between life is I'll ask whoever they're with, whether it's a guide or if they've just kind of blended in with all the other souls into the ether and reached that place of peace, I ask whatever that source is there to guide them back to their current life, to help them understand or see any other areas of their current life that need healing. And that can be a really profound thing. So, I had another one of my clients who she after she experienced, the breadth of her between life, she was taken to a scene or a memory when she was a kid in school where she would eat lunch in the bathroom all by herself. And she was afraid to eat in the lunchroom because she was picked on. And she had carried this with her from, a very young age to her adulthood. And that memory of just that not being accepted and being picked on was just so terrible for her that, I don't even think she realized how profoundly it still impacted her life in the current moment. And so the souls guided her, the spirits guided her to that memory, and they filled her with so much love while she was eating in that bathroom by herself. And she found this forgiveness for these girls who had picked on her and been so mean to her, and she left that memory and was just completely, renewed and restored. And so that's the kind of thing that I typically find that happens in a between life. I don't necessarily get a picture of what the future holds, and in fact, oftentimes spirit can be very reluctant to give information about the future in that place. So spirit may reveal what your purpose is, right? But they don't necessarily say, well, you're going to have 2 kids, and you're going to, or we're moving from a 3D existence into a 5D. I haven't had that experience. I mean, there may be other hypnotherapists who have. I just haven't seen it. So to answer your question, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that, I most of my network are not people like me. They're not spiritual hippie dippies, at least not not as much as I am. I tend to be way out there. You know how it goes, Mandee. I mean, we're all.
I do.
There are no
we
words.
We march to our own beat.
Yes, exactly. We have our own unique shaman drum that we beat. And but what I'm seeing now is an acceptance of things, or an opening of the minds to things that I haven't seen before. And I think it's getting more and more accepted, and people are starting to see through the veil of the illusion that we live under, the illusion that we're just this human. I love how Eckhart describes it as, we're all human and being, but we're so connected to our humanness that we forget the beingness of who we are. And so what I'm seeing is people are starting to see through that a little bit more now, and they're starting to say, wait a minute, like, even if they don't even, I think the collective consciousness and vibration that's being raised across the board is just, helping everybody's, right? So, I mean, it's like quantum in the sense of, you're familiar with quantum entanglement where the particles split. And so it's the same thing. When 10 people raise their vibration, it raises the vibration of things of beings around them, even if they're not aware of it. It's just raising. And so I think there's so many of us, whether it be through yoga or meditation or gifts and abilities and even healing, that it's starting to impact other people who might not be interested in this stuff or believe in it to at least have an open mind to it. And it's so exciting to see that happening. And I think, from my perspective, this is what I'm seeing. I'm just seeing that there's just the collective heart is opening a little bit more. And I shared this, after the George Floyd travesty, that, we, for the first time, I had seen people of all races and all religions coming together in a very painful moment to stand together. And I've used this metaphor in that, when a woman gives birth to a baby, it can be incredibly painful. That moment where the birth, it's so painful, but it results in the birth of a beautiful new life that comes into existence. And I really feel that that's what's happening now in our collective whole, is that we're going through a lot of pain right now across the board. There's COVID, there's George Floyd, there's all these things that are happening in the world that just, as Ram Dass says, the suffering, right? Like when we stand in our humanness, we experience this suffering, but when we stand in the spirit, we see everything as being perfect. And I think we're starting to get to that place where we're in the pain now, but that pain is going to result in the birth of something so new and so beautiful, and we just can't see it yet. I mean, some of you really gifted intuitives can. I'm not one of those people, but some of you gifted intuitives can really see that, but that's just my perspective on what I'm seeing.
I think it's beautiful and very in alignment with what I see and feel too, is that this entire shift that we're going through, and every single human, no matter how woke you want to consider yourself or not, everyone knows we're going through some kind of shift. Every single person is uncomfortable with the COVID situation in the entire world. And so everyone's forced to look at things just a little differently and shift their perspectives. And that alone, I think, is kind of waking and shaking our current matrix that we all live within. And I believe very much that this revolution begins with inner evolution, and it's all about that love and acceptance and the openings of the mind. So you'll find as you go along your spiritual path and you go to different readers or healers and you learn all these wonderful things about this life and past lives and whatnot, you'll come to find that what it all comes down to is this beautiful aspect of love and acceptance, so that we can start bridging into unconditional love. And my favorite, most simplest kind of version of the difference between the 3D and the 5D right now is the 3D is where you are programmed to everything you believe in has limits. Whereas when you shift your perspective into the 5D, you see everything through the lens of love, acceptance, that it's perfect as it is, and that you believe in unlimited possibilities.
Yeah, I love how you frame that, Mandee, because I feel like when in a lot of the conversations that you hear in the spiritual community about 5D is you start seeing all these things. You're astral traveling, you're doing this, you're doing that, and it's not always about that. It's not always in my experience. I tend to align with exactly what you're saying. Is it just changes who you are on the inside. It doesn't necessarily result in different experiences or spiritual experiences. It can. It doesn't have to. But I think people really stress out because unneeded, because they hear about this 5D stuff and they're like, well, I'm just this human. I don't see any of that stuff. And it's like they feel like they're not achieving. They're not reaching those different levels of vibration. But the reality, it's just like your third eye, right? With your third eye, you can see all kinds of really cool stuff, mystical things, or it just opens you up to a better understanding and a stronger ability to have clarity about things, right? And so you don't have to see someone who's crossed over in your third eye to be in the fifth dimension. You just have to have healed. And gotten to a place to, like you said, it's just a different level of consciousness, it's a different level of awareness that you reach. And it doesn't make you any better or any worse than anybody else. It doesn't set you, you don't get a special badge for awakening and being in the 5D. I mean, we're all where we're supposed to be in this part of our journey. And so, so I just would share that with your listeners. If there's anyone who's listening in that's like, wow, I'm not doing, what's wrong with me, right? Like, why am I not where Mandee is? Why don't I have the gifts and abilities that Mandee has? And I share that from my own experience, because I felt that lack for a long time after beginning my awakening. And I didn't realize that everyone has a different experience with awakening, and you can't compare your path to anybody else's. You just have to trust that the path you're on is the exact path you're supposed to be on.
So true. And, I can't reiterate what you just said enough, because each soul path is so incredibly individual. And we were taught to compete with one another. We were taught to compete with ourselves, to feel down about ourselves, to question everything we're doing, and to not listen to our intuition. But here on Heart Over Ego Radio, I always encourage to our listeners and myself and my own clients, if you just want to find some place to start making decisions, whether they're small or big to start, but decisions based on what your heart wants most, and not what anyone else thinks or might think. And if what your heart wants most is benevolent and for the highest good, it will be for the highest good of everything. Sometimes others will react. We keep one another bound in these kind of energy dramas because we're afraid often of the reactions that we might receive from others. And that's a whole nother part in learning how to heal and evolve within yourself. And you'll learn that a lot of times from past lives. It'll come through. I'll get little flashes here or there. And sometimes it's almost, maybe from what you've described, sometimes I think some of the psychic flashes I get are more in between lives, because I'll see a sudden death or karma's starting to leave, or like what it is they're working on in this lifetime, whether it's releasing anger or hurt or fear or some sort of shame. There's all these things that come up for it. And it's just a beautiful time to not only go within ourselves, but this is literally, like you just said, Adam, we're giving birth to a new matrix. And we're calling in our divine masculine and our divine feminine counterparts. We're honoring both of these energies within us, and we're getting ready to really, I believe, collectively and individually give birth to new versions of ourselves and to what this world looks like. And things are going to differ. Like, we're already starting to change our value system on different things after COVID, and what's important to us and what's not. So I'm excited to see what happens, and I don't get a lot of super futuristic details other than it's going to be a lot more peaceful, a lot more harmonious. It's going to respect the individual as well as the earth and the planet, and we're going to work together more, because we're going to release so many of the hurts that we're carrying within us individually and generationally.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. No.
Yeah. I mean, what else is there to say after that? I mean, it's definitely cool. I mean, to be able to see a little bit outside of what we're restricted to, or what our limitations are as humans, by tapping into that beingness that's inside of us. Some people get that through gifts and abilities. Other people experience it on sacred medicines like Bufo and ayahuasca. Everyone has their own path to the mystical realm. Some people go under hypnosis and experience past lives in between lives, or come in for a Reiki healing session and wake up, feel like that energy for the first time in their lives. Like, I feel so much better. I don't know what happened. But to have some level of connection to whatever that thing is, that sort of acts as the soul's GPS, as your internal GPS, whether it's as profound as what you just shared, or just some sacred insights about ourselves, and about who we are, and remembering who we are. There's a spectrum, and so I would encourage everyone out there to, enjoy this life. We're given this human life, and when I say enjoy it, I mean explore it. Really, really sink your teeth into it. Don't let your fear keep you from doing things that you want to do. If you've been called to sit with ayahuasca and heal that way, do it. Don't worry about what your friends are going to say. You don't have to tell your friends. I mean, eventually you will once you experience it and you're like, oh my God, I have to tell everybody about this. But, if you're being called to do it, if your soul is being called to do something, you'll know it, do it. You don't have to wait for permission for anybody else. And there is nobody else. The reality of it is we are all one. We're all one soul. When you can get past the duality of, Mandee, if I look at you through my human eyes, I see somebody else. But if I look at you and I look into your eyes and I look into your soul and realize that you're made of the same spiritual DNA that I am. Your soul fabric and my soul fabric come from the same source, and we're just. I talk about Ram Dass all the time because he's I consider him to be a guru for me, and Alan Watts to some extent too say the same thing. Is we're just God and drag here, and what that means is we're souls that are walking around in these bodies, and we think we're these bodies, but we're all one. We're all come from the same source, and when we can understand that it's the ego. And it's the human side of the being that we're afraid of hearing no, or you're not accepted. When you realize that that's the human part of the being that may not align with your beliefs, or think that taking a mushroom or whatever it is not a good idea, but it's not necessarily their soul that's doing that. That's their ego, and you can just put that aside and say, I understand. They're not thinking. They're not speaking from a place of soul, and knowing that the person's soul inside of them is completely on board with what you're doing because you're the same thing. You know what I mean? It's right. Like it's hard to put into words. It's really hard to put into words. So I guess I'm just encouraging you, do what it is where your heart and your soul is guiding you, because everybody else around you is going through one thing or another where their heart and soul is guiding them. Whether they listen to it or are sensitive to it is not your concern. So just do you.
Do you. Seriously. And that's the thing. If we try to not let what other people think keep us bound, and we follow what the true intentions of our hearts are, like, that's your soul path. And I always try to describe a simple version of the ego is your ego is you in this lifetime. It's all of the programming, experiences, and things you picked up along the way in this lifetime. And it's super important because you needed that knowledge. Like a lot of the books I read, I love referencing, and I don't need to say, oh, I downloaded that or channeled that. I'm like, no, I read this book and it was really great, and this person said it. My ego will remember that. And your ego can be your best friend and your driving force and your gumption. But if you let it take over and you let it shadow up over your heart, then you lose sight of allowing your soul to lead you through life. And then you get caught up into this matrix. Yes,
absolutely. And you know what? If you get caught up in the matrix, you get caught up in it. And that's okay too. We're all exactly where we're supposed to be. Everyone, too many of us are rushing around to become somebody versus just being. And if you learn anything about the nature of your soul, is that your soul is still. And so learning to be still with your soul, and just accepting where you are, Mandee, you and I, it was our plan in life to be having this conversation right here, right now, together. And there's no other place that you and I are supposed to be right now except for right here. And everyone else who's listening to this right now, there's no other place you're supposed to be besides listening to this conversation right now. And so just trust the path, trust the flow of life. Just know that wherever you are, you're supposed to be, and where you're supposed to be tomorrow, you'll be. And so just trust that. Just trust that the flow of life is always working as it's supposed to.
Those are beautiful words, Don. Adam, will you share with our listeners one more time how they can follow you or get a hold of you if they want some more of your magic?
Absolutely. So you can reach me. You can shoot me an email, adam@sacredstairways.com. You can go to sacredstairways.com. You can go to the Spirit Woke podcast website, which is spiritwoke.com. Or you can just Google Adam Dince and Dince, and I'm the only Adam Dince in the world, so you'll find me much easier than looking for Joe Smith. So, and you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. However you want to connect with me, I'd love to connect with you, and any way I can be a part of your journey, it would be my honor.
And you said the end of the month, or maybe was it the end of this month or September? We can look
End of August.
End of August. Spirit Book's coming back.
Absolutely. So you can go to spiritwoke.com and subscribe, and you'll get notified as soon as the next episode goes live.
Beautiful. Adam, thank you so much for coming and holding Soul Space today with me and all of our listeners. It was truly an honor to hear all of your energy and experiences and perspectives that you shared with us today.
Thank you for having me, Mandee. It's truly been an honor.
Well, thanks to our listeners. Wishing you all a beautiful day wherever you are in this time-space continuum. Many blessings. Bye-bye.